The sharp crash of breaking glass cut through the ballroom. Instantly, conversations died. Heads turned. A woman near the buffet let out a startled gasp. 20 feet away, frozen beside a table filled with tiny cheesecakes and shrimp cocktails, stood Melissa Grant, my former best friend and the woman who ran off with my fiancé the night before our wedding. A crystal wine glass had slipped from her fingers and shattered across the floor. Red wine spread across the carpet like spilled paint. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. And for the briefest moment, I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because 7 years earlier, I would have given anything to see Melissa lose that flawless composure she wore like armor. Back then, I had been the one falling apart. Back then, I had been the one everyone stared at. Now, for the first time, it was her. The first warning sign was silence, not the peaceful kind. The unsettling kind that creeps in when something is wrong, but nobody wants to say it out loud. I stood in my kitchen staring at my phone for what felt like the 100th time that morning. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. My wedding was supposed to start in less than 4 hours. The florist had already delivered the arrangements. My aunt was helping decorate the reception hall. Relatives had traveled from 3 different states to be there, and my fiancé wasn't answering his phone. At first, I tried to stay calm. He's nervous, I told myself. People got nervous before weddings. It happened all the time. But by 10 o'clock, that explanation stopped making sense. Derek Lawson wasn't just late. He had completely disappeared. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted him. No response. My stomach twisted into a knot. A few minutes later, my cousin Rachel walked into the kitchen holding her phone. The expression on her face made my heart sink immediately. "Claire," she said quietly. I looked up. "What is it? What is it?" She hesitated. Then she handed me the phone. The photograph showed Derek standing beside a black SUV at a gas station nearly 50 miles outside the city. Beside him stood Vanessa Cole, my best friend, the woman who had helped me pick out my wedding dress. The woman who had spent the previous afternoon sitting at my dining room table, laughing with me about honeymoon plans. They weren't alone by accident. They weren't running errands. The photo captured something far worse. Derek's arm was wrapped around her waist. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room spun. "This isn't real," I whispered. Rachel didn't answer, because we both knew it was. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. Then my phone buzzed. A text message. Just 6 words. "I'm sorry. I can't do this." That was it. 5 years together. Thousands of memories. Hundreds of plans. 6 words. No explanation. No apology. No goodbye. I don't remember much of the next hour. Only fragments. My aunt crying. My father pacing. Guests arriving at the venue. Questions nobody could answer. At some point, someone asked whether we should postpone the ceremony. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound shocked everyone in the room, including me, because there wasn't going to be a ceremony. There wasn't going to be a marriage. There wasn't even going to be closure. Just humiliation. The worst part wasn't losing Derek. Not immediately. The worst part was making the phone calls, over and over, repeating the same awful story. No, the wedding isn't happening. No, he's not sick. No, there's no misunderstanding. Each conversation felt like reopening the wound. By evening, I was emotionally numb. The reception hall sat empty. The wedding cake remained untouched. The honeymoon tickets were useless. And the future I'd spent years planning had vanished in a single day. A week later, rumors spread across town. People talked. They always do. Some said Derek and Vanessa had fallen madly in love. Others claimed they'd been secretly seeing each other for months. Nobody knew the whole truth. Least of all me. What I did know was this. The 2 people I trusted most had disappeared together. And they hadn't looked back. The months that followed were brutal. I sold the townhouse Derek and I had purchased together. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. I stopped attending social events. Stopped answering invitations. Stopped pretending I was okay. Every morning felt like work. Every night felt longer. But eventually, something unexpected happened. I survived. Then I survived another day. Then another. Little by little, I began rebuilding. I started a small consulting business from my apartment. At first, it barely paid the bills. Then clients started returning. Then referrals came. Then opportunities. The progress was slow. Painfully slow. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't building a future around someone else. I was building one for myself. What I didn't know was that 10 years later, a single invitation would bring Derek and Vanessa crashing back into my life. And when that happened, the truth behind their betrayal would finally come out. A truth neither of them wanted anyone to know. 10 years passed. Not quickly, not easily, but they passed. The heartbreak that once felt unbearable slowly became a scar instead of an open wound. My consulting business grew beyond anything I had imagined. What started as a laptop on a kitchen table became a respected company with employees, clients, and an office overlooking downtown. I bought a house, made new friends, built routines that had nothing to do with Derek Lawson or Vanessa Cole. Most importantly, I stopped wondering why they had done it. The answer no longer mattered. Or at least that's what I told myself. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a white envelope arrived in my mailbox. I almost threw it away without opening it. Almost. Instead, I carried it inside and dropped it onto the kitchen counter. Hours later, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Inside was an invitation to my university's 25th class reunion. The event would take place at a luxury hotel downtown. One night, one ballroom. Hundreds of former classmates, including almost certainly Derek and Vanessa. I immediately tossed the invitation into the trash. Problem solved, or so I thought. Later that night, while brushing my teeth, a question appeared in my mind. Why am I still hiding? The thought irritated me. I hadn't seen Derek in a decade, hadn't spoken to Vanessa once, yet the possibility of being in the same room with them was enough to make me avoid an event I'd actually wanted to attend. The realization bothered me more than the reunion itself. So before I could change my mind, I dug the invitation out of the trash and bought a ticket online. The second I clicked confirm purchase, regret arrived. For the next month, I questioned my decision almost daily. What if people asked uncomfortable questions? What if Derek and Vanessa acted like nothing had happened? What if I lost my composure? The closer the reunion got, the worse my nerves became. On the evening of the event, I sat in my car outside the hotel for nearly 20 minutes. The building glowed with warm lights. Guests laughed as they entered through the front doors. Everything looked normal. Meanwhile, my hands were gripping the steering wheel like I was preparing for battle. "You're being ridiculous, Claire," I muttered. Still, I didn't move. Finally, I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and got out. The ballroom buzzed with conversation. Music played softly in the background. Old classmates hugged each other, shared stories, and laughed about things that had happened decades ago. For a while, everything felt surprisingly comfortable. I chatted with former classmates, looked through old photographs, listened to embarrassing stories from our college years. The tension slowly faded. Maybe this wasn't a mistake after all. Maybe Derek and Vanessa weren't even coming. The thought had barely crossed my mind when the ballroom doors opened, and there they were. Derek Lawson, Vanessa Cole, walking in side by side. Time did something strange in that moment. 10 years disappeared. Not completely. Just enough to remind me what betrayal felt like. Derek looked older, more polished, more expensive. Vanessa wore a designer dress and the kind of confidence that demanded attention. Several people immediately walked over to greet them. They smiled, laughed, accepted compliments. It was obvious they enjoyed being noticed. I looked away. Unfortunately, Vanessa spotted me. Our eyes met across the room. For a fraction of a second, her smile vanished. Then it returned. Brighter than before. Fake. Carefully controlled. The same smile she'd worn when she lied to me 10 years ago. A few minutes later, Derek approached. Claire, hearing his voice again felt strange, like opening a book you'd finished years ago. Derek. His smile remained in place. You look great. Thanks. An awkward silence followed. Then Vanessa joined us. Claire, wow, it's been forever. I almost laughed. Forever. As if we'd simply drifted apart. As if she hadn't disappeared with my fiancé the day before my wedding. But I stayed calm. Yes, it has. More classmates joined the conversation. Soon we were standing in a small circle near the bar. For a while, everything remained civil. Then Vanessa started talking. About luxury vacations, about beachfront resorts, about expensive renovations. Every story somehow circled back to money, status, or success. The performance was exhausting. Finally, someone turned toward me. So Claire, what have you been up to? Before I could answer, Derek spoke. I heard she's running some kind of consulting company. Some kind. The words were subtle, but intentional. I smiled. Actually, we're doing pretty well. That's good, Derek said. The way he said it immediately annoyed me. Not supportive, not sincere, patronizing. Like he was congratulating me for surviving. Like he still believed he was the winner of a competition I hadn't realized we were having. I excused myself and walked toward the refreshment table. My pulse was racing. I hated that. After 10 years, he could still affect me. I grabbed a glass of water and tried to steady myself. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Derek was standing there, alone. And something in his expression told me he hadn't come over to apologize. Not even close. Funny, isn't it? He said. What is? How everything worked out. The smile on his face made my stomach tighten, because suddenly I knew exactly where this conversation was heading, and I had a feeling the night was about to get much worse. Derek swirled the ice in his glass and glanced around the ballroom. Then he smiled. Not the warm smile I used to know. This one was different. Smug. Satisfied. The smile of someone who thought he'd already won. Funny, isn't it? He repeated. What's funny? 10 years ago, I thought walking away would be difficult. I stared at him. He took a sip of his drink. Turns out it was the best decision I ever made. The words landed exactly the way he'd intended. Like a slap. For a moment, I simply looked at him. Not because I was shocked, because I was amazed someone could still be that arrogant after all these years. Derek! He interrupted. I mean, look around. His hand gestured casually toward the ballroom. Everything worked out exactly the way it was supposed to. Several nearby conversations had already started slowing down. People were listening. Whether Derek realized it or not, he suddenly had an audience. I don't regret anything, he continued. Not leaving. Not choosing Vanessa. None of it. The room grew quieter. I noticed people exchanging uncomfortable glances. A woman standing near the bar lowered her drink. Someone else stopped mid-conversation. Derek didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't care. For 10 years, he'd probably been telling himself the same story. The story where he was the hero. The story where leaving me was justified. The story where everyone eventually agreed he made the right choice. Unfortunately for him, reality wasn't cooperating. You know, he said, leaning slightly closer, sometimes people end up exactly where they're supposed to be. There it was. The insult hidden inside a compliment. The suggestion that his life had become extraordinary while mine had merely become acceptable. I felt my jaw tighten. Across the room, Vanessa was watching. She wasn't stopping him. She wasn't embarrassed. She was just standing there, watching. Exactly like she'd watched 10 years earlier. The realization hurt less than I expected, because suddenly I saw them clearly, not as the people who destroyed my future. Not as villains, just two deeply unhappy people still trying to convince themselves they'd made the right choices. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, a familiar voice interrupted. Claire! The voice came from the ballroom entrance, bright, excited, unmistakably young. Dozens of heads turned, including mine. A little girl came running through the doorway, dark curls bouncing with every step. A huge smile stretched across her face. Behind her walked a tall man in a navy suit. The moment I saw them, I couldn't help smiling. Lily! The little girl ran straight toward me. I barely had time to crouch before she threw her arms around my neck. The entire room watched. Then came the moment nobody expected. Not even me. Mom! The word echoed through the ballroom. Conversation stopped instantly. A glass slipped from someone's hand. The crash seemed to echo forever. I looked up. Vanessa stood frozen, her face completely pale. Meanwhile, Derek looked utterly confused. Lily hugged me tighter. I laughed despite everything. Looks like you did. The tall man finally reached us. His name was Adrian Hayes. Architect. Widower. The kindest man I'd ever met. The man who had slowly become the most important person in my life. Sorry, Adrian said, smiling. She spotted you before I could stop her. No, you didn't. Okay, he admitted. I really didn't. Several classmates laughed. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Questions began spreading through the crowd. Who was the little girl? Who was Adrian? How did they know Claire? And most importantly, why had nobody heard about any of this? Lily took my hand. Can I have cake now? I laughed. That's why you came, isn't it? She nodded proudly. Mostly. More laughter erupted nearby. Even people who didn't know the situation could sense something had changed. The spotlight Derek had wanted for himself had completely disappeared. Now everyone was looking at me. Not with pity, not with sympathy, with curiosity. And suddenly, for the first time all evening, Derek looked nervous. Very nervous. Because he had just spent 20 minutes acting as though my life had never recovered. Only to discover he knew absolutely nothing about it. As classmates gathered around us, introductions began. Questions followed. And before long, the truth about my life over the past decade would begin coming out. A truth that would completely destroy the story Derek and Vanessa had been telling everyone for years. And judging by the look on Vanessa's face, she already knew it. Within minutes, half the reunion seemed gathered around our table. Not because anyone enjoyed drama, because people were curious. For years, most of them had assumed they knew the story. Derek left Claire. Vanessa got the man. End of story. Simple, clean, finished. Except life rarely stays that simple. Lily was happily working her way through a slice of chocolate cake, while Adrienne answered polite questions from former classmates. Meanwhile, I noticed something interesting. The more people learned about my life, the quieter Derek became. Apparently, hearing that my consulting company had expanded into 3 states wasn't part of his plan for the evening. Neither was learning that I'd recently been featured in a regional business magazine, or that Adrienne and I had been together for nearly 4 years. Every new detail seemed to chip away at his confidence. Vanessa noticed it too. She stood beside him with a forced smile that looked increasingly painful. Then something unexpected happened. A woman named Monica stepped forward. Back in college, Monica had been the kind of person who noticed everything. Apparently, she still was. She looked at Derek, then at Vanessa, then back at me. "Can I ask something?" The room grew quieter. "Sure," I said. Monica folded her arms. "Did they really start dating after the wedding was canceled?" The question landed like a grenade. Vanessa immediately looked away. Derek's expression hardened. Nobody answered. That silence said plenty. Monica raised an eyebrow. "Because that's never made sense to me." A few people exchanged glances. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who'd wondered. Derek forced a laugh. "That was a long time ago. That's not what I asked." The smile disappeared from his face. For the first time all evening, he looked cornered. Then another voice joined in. "I wondered the same thing." People turned. It was Rachel, my cousin. The same cousin who had shown me that devastating photograph 10 years earlier. She stepped forward calmly. "I never believed it started after the wedding." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. Derek took a long drink from his glass. Neither of them spoke. And somehow that silence became louder than any answer. Then Monica said something nobody expected. "My husband worked at your old office." Derek's head snapped toward her. The room instantly froze. "What?" She shrugged. "He mentioned seeing you and Vanessa together months before the wedding." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The air itself seemed to stop. For a second, Derek looked genuinely stunned, then angry. Very angry. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Monica didn't sound convinced. Neither did anyone else, because suddenly pieces were falling into place. The disappearances, the secretive behavior, the way everything had happened so quickly. People began connecting dots, and once that process starts, it's impossible to stop. Vanessa finally spoke. "Derek?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He turned toward her. The look they exchanged told everyone more than words ever could. Guilt, resentment, exhaustion. Years of it. Suddenly, Adrienne stepped beside me. Not protectively, not possessively, just quietly present. The difference mattered. Derek noticed. His eyes narrowed. "You think you've got everything figured out, don't you?" Adrienne remained calm. "Then stay out of it." The tension immediately spiked. Several classmates looked uncomfortable. Others looked fascinated. Adrienne studied him for a moment, then spoke. "You know what's interesting?" Derek laughed bitterly. "Here we go. For years, you keep telling everyone how right your decision was." Silence. Adrienne continued. "But happy people usually don't spend a decade trying to prove they're happy." The words hit like a hammer. Nobody argued, because everyone could see it. The expensive clothes, the constant bragging, the need to remind everyone how successful he was. Suddenly, it looked less like confidence and more like insecurity. Vanessa closed her eyes, just for a second, as though she was tired, very tired. Then she surprised everyone, including Derek. She spoke quietly. "So what if it started before the wedding?" The room went dead silent. A collective gasp seemed to sweep through the ballroom. Derek stared at her, completely stunned. Vanessa? She ignored him. For years, she'd maintained the same story, the same lie. Now, standing in front of dozens of former classmates, she looked exhausted, like she no longer had the energy to carry it. We lied. Nobody moved. We lied to everyone. Another silence, longer this time, more powerful. Vanessa swallowed, then looked directly at me. We were seeing each other long before your wedding. The words landed heavily. People stared. Some looked shocked. Others looked vindicated, as if they had suspected it all along. Derek's face had gone completely pale. Stop talking. No. His voice sharpened. Vanessa? No. This time she sounded stronger. Years of frustration seemed to pour out all at once. We spent a decade pretending our relationship started after the wedding because it sounded better. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared. Vanessa laughed bitterly. But the truth? She looked at Derek, then at me. The truth is much uglier. For the first time all night, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't even feel vindicated. I simply felt free. Because after 10 years, the truth was finally standing in the open where everyone could see it. And judging by the expression on Derek's face, the worst revelation was still coming. The ballroom had become so quiet that I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner overhead. Vanessa stood motionless. Derek looked like a man watching his carefully built world collapse in real time. For years, they had controlled the narrative. Now they couldn't. The truth was finally out, and it wasn't flattering. Derek stepped forward. Enough. His voice was sharp, defensive, desperate. But nobody seemed interested in rescuing him. Not anymore. Vanessa laughed softly. It wasn't a happy laugh. It sounded exhausted. You still don't get it, do you? Get what? She stared at him. The reason we're standing here. Derek looked confused. For the first time all evening, he genuinely seemed unsure of himself. Vanessa shook her head. You spent 10 years trying to convince everyone you won. The words hung in the air. Then she pointed toward me. And she stopped playing the game years ago. A silence followed, a meaningful one, because everyone suddenly understood exactly what she meant. While Derek and Vanessa had spent a decade comparing lives, measuring success, and protecting appearances, I had simply moved on. Vanessa turned toward me. There were tears in her eyes now. Not dramatic tears, just honest ones. I owe you an apology. I said nothing. She continued, I should have apologized years ago. The room remained silent. I told myself I didn't need to. A bitter smile crossed her face. Then I told myself it was too late. She looked down briefly. The truth is I was ashamed. No one interrupted, not even Derek. Vanessa took a slow breath. I hurt someone who trusted me. Her eyes met mine, and I've had to live with that every day. The strange thing was that hearing those words didn't give me the satisfaction I once imagined. Years earlier, I might have celebrated. I might have felt victorious. Instead, I felt something else. Closure. Nothing more. Nothing less. Finally, I nodded. Not because everything was forgiven. Not because the past didn't matter, but because carrying resentment for 10 years had been exhausting. Vanessa seemed to understand. A small tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. Then she walked toward the exit. Nobody stopped her. Nobody followed. She simply disappeared through the ballroom doors. Derek watched her leave. For a moment, it looked as though he might go after her. Instead, he stood there alone, completely alone. And suddenly, the confident man who had entered the reunion earlier seemed much smaller, much older, much sadder. A few seconds later, he quietly set his drink on a nearby table. Then he left too. No speech, no final argument, no dramatic exit, just silence. The doors closed behind him, and that was the end of it, or at least the end of them. The room slowly returned to life. Conversations restarted, music resumed, people began laughing again. The reunion moved forward, but something had changed. A chapter had finally closed. Later that evening, I stepped outside onto the hotel terrace. The city lights sparkled in the distance. The cool night air felt refreshing, peaceful. A few moments later, Adrian joined me. He handed me a cup of coffee. Neither of us spoke immediately. Finally, he smiled. You okay? I thought about the question, about the wedding, the betrayal, the years of rebuilding, the reunion, the truth. Then I smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from deep inside. Yeah, I said, I think I finally am. Adrian squeezed my hand. At that exact moment, the ballroom doors burst open behind us. Lily came running outside. There you are! She wrapped her arms around my waist. "We've been looking everywhere." I laughed. "Have you?" "Yes." She pointed dramatically toward the ballroom, and they brought out more cake. A very serious announcement, the most important news of the night, according to her. Adrian laughed. I laughed. Even Lily laughed. And standing there beneath the city lights, I realized something important. For years, I thought the worst day of my life had defined me. I thought being abandoned was my story. It wasn't. It was just one chapter. A painful chapter. But not the ending. The ending looked nothing like I expected. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't public humiliation. It wasn't watching other people fail. It was this. Peace. A man I trusted. A little girl who loved me. A future built on honesty instead of appearances. As we walked back toward the ballroom, Lily slipped her hand into mine. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt grateful for every twist my life had taken. Because if Derek and Vanessa hadn't broken my heart all those years ago, I never would have found the life waiting for me on the other side. And that life turned out to be far better than anything I had planned.